Okay, so I'm going to do this video to start making things a lot more sensible as to what we're doing. Everybody's been like, Adam, you're doing all this studying, this Tantra stuff, you're trying to explain the Tantra stuff to everybody, people aren't really grasping it, which I don't expect them to. There's a lot of shit to absorb. So I want to break things down and start with the basis of understanding. In Tantra Hinduism, they have different levels that they call tatvas. The highest tattva is Brahman. The next lowest to Brahman is where you see the separation of the cosmic Shiva and the cosmic Shakti. When they're enjoined together, that is Brahman. Makes sense? So, in inverse or reverse, when you have Ahriman entangled with Manasa, Manasa being the snake that's wrapped around Ahriman, that would be the Supreme Ahriman, is how we're calling it. So this is like the conjoining of Shiva and Shakti, but it's the conjoining of Ahriman and Manasa. Make sense? Okay. We're good on that track. What we have to understand is we need to understand what Manasa is. I'm sure not very many people even bothered looking, researching, or even caring. Manasa, first off, is Vasuki's sister. Vasuki is the Naga that sits on Shiva's neck. You can also see it on the statue here, if it will come off the table. Okay. Vasuki. The main story about Vasuki, which does include Manasa, is that the Asuras had gained power over the world. The Daevas needed to fight back. They got to the World Stone. Vasuki wrapped himself around the World Stone. One side pulled his head, the other side pulled his tail to shake the waters of the world until the elixir of immortality and the poison were both revealed. Chinnamasta took the elixir of immortality, drank it, then cut off her head so the Asuras couldn't get the prize. At the same time, Shiva drank the poison, and it was Manasa who clutched his neck and stopped the poison from being ingested. And that's why they call him the Blue Throat. So now when it trans over into traditional Ahrimanism, this is why we call Shiva non-shite, and he's over the throat chakra, which is evil speech, because his speech has been permanently poisoned, along with the fact that he keeps a snake around his throat as well. Because the worst of the worst, as far as things go in Zoroastrianism, is snakes. Anything that has to do with a snake or a serpent, that is the most evil, murderous thing. Does that make sense? Now, part of Manasa saving Shiva rejects her. He does away with her. They say, in a form, divorces her. And during that, Chanti, which is another form of Shakti, and this is where you start blending the lines of Hinduism, poked out her eye with a hot thing so that Manasa only has one eye. But that's only in one of the three mythologies that all talk about this same mythos. So I'm going to kind of just tear that back. But it all states that Shiva rejected Manasa. Manasa is Vasuki's sister. She is the queen or the mother of all serpents. So you can only imagine how that goes over in Zoroastrianism. So both Mensa, Manasa, and Vasuki are the rulers of the lowest realm of Naraka, which is Kalkola. Also, the black poison, like Shiva swallowed. Make sense? Everybody understand how I'm putting all this together? Okay, so during the part where Ahriman becomes this great dragon or this huge serpent and covers up the entire atmosphere so the sunlight cannot touch the ground, it brings about the Ice Age. We've all read that, right? Okay, also, in a comparative story that comes from the Rig Veda, there is a dragon known as Ahi. Obviously, Azidahaka this is a preliminary for this story. But Ahi is the opposite of an earth goddess who built up all these towers over all the 7 rivers and dried out the land. And it was Vedic Indra who originally fought this dragon. The dragon swallowed Vedic Indra and won. Then all the gods got together and slayed the dragon and got Vedic Indra out of the dragon. And then that destroyed all the towers and the flood came in because all the dams were broken. So if we go back to the story of Ahriman, at that point he was defeated by all the Ahoras and shoved into the deepest layers of hell. And then when all the ice melted, everything flooded out. So it's the same kind of flood story coming from both. So we read about in the Zoroastrian that Jahi, who was originally Anahita, the spirit feminine goddess of water, was sent in by both Zervan and Ahura Mazda to coax Ahriman awake so that Ahriman can give man the ability to populate the earth. In other words, have sex, procreating, have children. But in the process of that, it gave Ahriman the opportunity to have the weapon known as Akamana, which is concupiscence of the mind or evil thinking, to use against all of mankind. Makes sense? And so, if she was already rejected by Shiva, and she needed another husband, why wouldn't she wrap herself around Ahriman and become Ahriman's consort? Especially if she is the mother of all snakes, and snakes are the main evil, according to Zoroastrians, with Ahriman. So now we see, again, a combination of a cosmic being meeting a Naga and creating that perfect wisdom. Where you see the same thing with Shiva, a cosmic being getting together with Vasuki and creating that wisdom of evil and darkness and everything, along with the cosmic creature. But we must take into account that Ahriman is already the spirit of anguish. And now you have a divorced, anguished Naga that's been rejected by a god and became his consort. And then we also see, by the way she's wrapped around Ahriman, it indicates using the lower chakras along with the lower lokas of Naraka, representing the different planes of hell. And all those planes have 4 subplanes, thus 28 full lanes, whatever you want to call it, of hell. And they're all cataloged and everything else. And if you want it, the book will be available when it's available and you can read it then. So we have to keep in mind that with the combination of bringing Shakti and Shiva together creates Brahman, the combination of Manasa and Ahriman creates the Supreme Ahriman. And that is what we're moving towards becoming. Make sense? Any questions from you guys at this point?
Anahita, the water spirit who became Jahi, did she have any further role after coaxing Ahriman awake, or?
If you've read Bible Corruption, after she awakens him, he kisses her on the forehead. That creates menses for all womankind. And then Jahi continues to go about vexing the fire priest or the Zoroastrian magi by taking soma, bleeding an altar to corrupt the fire. Constantly, just being a vexing annoyance like all the Deva are.
Okay, so that all only happened because they needed Ahriman to make men lustful.
No, they needed a way for men to procreate with women to create children.
And so they sent Anahita, who became Jahi, which led to the corruption of Atar and giving concupiscence.
Concupiscence is vexing lust, or a vexing desire. In other words, it's a desire so bad that you have to give into it. It's more than just a vexation. Like if, you know, a fly on a horse's butt and the horse is slapping the fly away with its tail. That's kind of a vexation, that's an annoyance. But if a bee was to sting that horse in the ass, then the horse would be compelled to try to destroy the bee. See the difference?
Yeah, it's like an overwhelming compulsion
Yes,
versus a mild irritation.
exactly.
I see.
And that is what creates the evil thought, which moves into the evil speech, which then becomes the evil action.
Mm. So, with that one opportunity, he made like 4 or 5 different weapons out of it, I guess you could say.
Or more,
Yeah.
depending on how you look at it. Because if we go back, original Avestan Zoroastrianism is the 2 different spirits. There's no Y1, Y2, Y none of that. This one has this power, that one has that power, it's almost equal. It's when you have the cult of Zervanus that come in, and that's when the Jahi thing comes along. That's when they also had to come up with the fact that they needed a Horus. They needed extensions. So in order for it to be a monotheistic ideal, the Spenta Mainyu had to become aspects of Ahura will. And that was one of the other things that they cleaned up out of the religion, if you will. And then Ahriman counter-created the Spenta Mainyu with the Daevas. So if that's the case, then that means the Daevas themselves are an extension of Ahriman's will. As it's a counter-creation, and it's still a part of him. So when you look at the main Daevas against the Spenta Mainyu, that's where the war is. The war is between the wills of the 2 gods in these divided pieces. Make sense? And then we as human beings have each of those connected inside of us. And that's when you get to Middle Zoroastrianism, which is affected specifically by the Parsi, and then that's when you see them bringing in the Tantra stuff as the bad guy stuff, as the sorcerer stuff. Because they were forced out of Iran, they've gone into India, and they're seeing assholes like the Agori doing crazy shit in the fucking funeral pyres. And then they're watching, they're studying, and they're doing that, and then through that you see the development of the Daevas evolving into negative aspects of the Hindu gods that the Agori are working with. So that's now, at that point, you see an overlapping of like Shiva and Bhairava and the different forms of Shiva combining into becoming what Ahriman's like. Because Shiva is technically death, disease, but so is Yama. So now you're seeing a combination of Shiva and Yama becoming the Ahrimanic frame that we see now out of Middle and later Zoroastrianism. Does that make sense? Because you have the destructor and you have the death. And Ahriman is basically supposed to be both destruction and death. So when you get into the helping virtues, is what they call it, of Yama, when it goes to Vedic, not Puranic, but in Vedic, it's very much negative like a devil. Or it's jealousy, hunger, things like this that Yama is using to control the dead. Because originally, I think Ahriman is mostly based off of Yama when it comes to Vedic, but by the time it evolves into Middle Zoroastrianism, where they're having direct contact with the Tantra, that's when you see the evolution in all the Deva as well. And that's why now we can base off and build traditional Ahrimanism in consideration of what the Tantra is doing while keeping the principles of what the Devas actually are. Does that make a lot more sense as to how we're making our approach? So then if we see, for example, because I'm hoping to have that video up and done, we've rewritten 2 of the main Tantra, the initiation mantra is what they call it, and then the establishing of the goddess. We've done both of those. That initiation is just when they initiate into Brahma, we're initiating into the Supreme Ahriman. And I'll get it in just a minute. And then when we understand that with our chakras, we look at the Deva or Devi that are already over the chakras, and we start making our comparisons to the Zoroastrian Deva, that's how things start figuring out who's who in which chakra. And then once we make those assignments to those chakras, then we learn how to work with them. Now the problem being in Tantra is when you see the power of the Vajra, the lightning strike, the decapitation, switches over from Vedic Indra to Chinnamasta. And I gotta have to rewrite and make changes to things because we're gonna be removing Vedic Indra and replacing it with Chinnamasta when I get the chance to get in there and change that up, because she now holds the rights to the Vajra, which in Zoroastrianism, that lightning strike and fire from the lightning strike is the most holy pure fire, and that's what they try to use to start their fire pots with and keep the fire running off of that. And that leads to Zeus and everything else, because there was a whole lot of exchange between the Zoroastrians, because they were Persia, with Greece as well, and that's why the two interconnect a lot, because there was a lot shared between the two cultures. But anyway, so moving forward, what also differentiates us from doing normal Tantra is using what is called, or what I'm calling, the becoming rite, which is going to be in just about every aspect throughout all the Tantra stuff we're going to be doing, and that's going to be taking the stones that are assigned to the chakras, corrupting the vibration with Om Akalita Ahriman, which is the main mantra for Ahriman, taking those stones, which acts like magnets, pulling the negative energy off of the lower chakras, and then putting that negative energy, which is attracted directly to the tamas. If you remember the conversation we had about the gunas, and the tamas being the negative, the inertias. And then if you remember the conversations about what the lower chakras represent, the negative emotions. So we're taking that, pulling that negative tamas and emotion and bringing it to the corresponding middle chakra of the body. And this is how we're corrupting all the major chakras, which are nothing more than nadis, just really big nadis. And through touching the stone, we're corrupting that. And as we corrupt those chakras, we're corrupting the rest of the jiva. And in a lot of the rituals, there's a lot of ritual touching and saying things. And we say the corrupted words, Om Akalita Ahriman, and all these things for different fingers, and we touch different nadis with those fingers, thus negatively charging our jiva and corrupting it more and more and more. But those stones are specifically designed to take the negative tamas energy out of the hell realms that are connected to our lower chakras, and we're bringing it up the middle chakras. Then on top of that, when we get to our version of the Kundalini, we're going to be having Manasa come into us from the outside, working her way up through us, and then dissolving into Ahriman. And that's why we have to have the Ahriman initiation, so that you've already settled Ahriman in your mind, and you've compressed his spiritual energy into your jiva. That way you're constantly working only with the dark aspects. And that's why we're using the massage wand to plug up the anus, and not allowing Shakti off the tailbone, but allowing Manasa to come through and make that corruption and that desolation. And you were asking about the pranayama. There's different techniques to all the different pranayama and how they're breathing, but majority of what the pranayama is doing, other than teaching you breath control, teaching you how to raise prana, and obviously with all the touching, then you're doing all the prana raising and acting and getting all the nadis and all the energy throughout the body to help corrupt it. The other thing that you're doing is you're taking the dhyana, do you know what those are?
Okay. Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Dhyana are visualized techniques for mental visualization as a form of worship that go along with mantras to create a form. Like, so you're establishing the throne of Manasa in the heart, or you're establishing whatever it is in the body. So it first starts in the mind, and you have to hold the visuals. Then you're using the pranayama to suck that down through one side, hitting the thing so that it comes back up. Then you do the other side so that it gets sucked back down, the other side all the way down, and it comes back up. So that way the two major nodes that are enacted by breathing in and out of different nostrils or through your mouth or however it's done. Hold jiva down this way and then back up the middle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did some of the basic pranayama exercises, and that's what it seemed like, is that you were manipulating the energy and using that energy to make impressions on the subtle body.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Okay, good. Then I understood.
And then there are what they call the mula mantras. Like Om Akalita Ahriman is the main mantra, but in there it has a set of the mula, the male, I call it the masculine mula mantra, because it uses the pranayama and that mantra to seal up negative, positive, or feminine and positive together to create the one thing, thus Ahriman, Manasa, Supreme Ahriman, together. Then with the female mula mantra that we're using is based off of Kali or Swarva, which is a protection mantra, and that not only are we taking Swarva and then placing Swarva in the heart chakra, there's an under chakra called the Ananda Khanda, which has the 8 petals where you're putting in the 8 servants of Sakti, and then the 8 avatars of Shiva on that. And with those 8 petals come installing the 8 siddhis that you go to working on with the bija mantras to attain those siddhis of the perfection of each of those mantras. But you have to do the establishing ritual in order to get that established in your heart and get that going. So all of this is both external, internal, and then a combination of the two to create the proper corruption of the jiva so that we can pull it out of the reincarnation cycle. They call it moksha. The way the Tantras do it, obviously, they're clearing everything, they're balancing everything out with the cosmos, or we're working directly with the underworld and the devil side of things. So it's been very frustrating for me to be able to figure out how to work all this in, because with the way that the Mahanirvana is written, it's very difficult to take it apart, put the ritual together, figure out what has to be changed for us to accomplish our goals, rewrite, and then reconstruct the scripture that goes along with it. But that's where we're headed. And so that's the importance of Manasa. The other aspects of Manasa that I haven't really spoke on, other than being the Suki sister, being rejected by Shivai, Chandi poking on her eye, she protecting Shiva from swallowing the poison. She's also considered a Devi, and the worship of her, especially in Nepal, has put her in the line of what they Shivaism, and it's also put her in the line of being an actual goddess in Brahmaism, which is a part of all different aspects of Hinduism. So she is a well-known goddess in that area, but they don't usually work with her, because she's sometimes by a lot seen as a false goddess. But the thing is, she's one of the most friendly ones. As long as you're worshiping her, she's going to take care of you, much like most of these other ones. A lot of them see her as a false goddess because she's technically a Naga. And that's where a lot of things get screwed up. But the thing is, if you don't continue your worship with this goddess, like with Ahriman, you're going to know. And it's going to come back to haunt you. So we have to keep that in mind as well. But beyond that, I hope that makes the muddy water a little more clear. Any questions? All right, cool. Then I guess we're done. Hold jiva down this way and then back up the middle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did some of the basic pranayama exercises, and that's what it seemed like, is that you were manipulating the energy and using that energy to make impressions on the subtle body.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Okay, good. Then I understood.
And then there are what they call the mula mantras. Like Om Akalita Ahriman is the main mantra, but in there it has a set of the mula, the male, I call it the masculine mula mantra, because it uses the pranayama and that mantra to seal up negative, positive, or feminine and positive together to create the one thing, thus Ahriman, Manasa, Supreme Ahriman, together. Then with the female mula mantra that we're using is based off of Kali or Swarva, which is a protection mantra, and that not only are we taking Swarva and then placing Swarva in the heart chakra, there's an under chakra called the Ananda Kanda, which has the 8 petals where you're putting in the 8 servants of Sakti, and then the 8 avatars of Shiva on that. And with those 8 petals come installing the 8 siddhis that you go to working on with the bija mantras to attain those siddhis of the perfection of each of those mantras. But you have to do the establishing ritual in order to get that established in your heart and get that going. So all of this is both external, internal, and then a combination of the two to create the proper corruption of the jiva so that we could pull it out of the reincarnation cycle. They call it moksha. The way the Tantras do it, obviously, they're clearing everything, they're balancing everything out with the cosmos, or we're working directly with the underworld and the devil side of things. So it's been very frustrating for me to be able to figure out how to work all this in, because with the way that the Mahanirvana is written, it's very difficult to take it apart, put the ritual together, figure out what has to be changed for us to accomplish our goals, rewrite, and then reconstruct the scripture that goes along with it. But that's where we're headed. And so that's the importance of Manasa. The other aspects of Manasa that I haven't really spoke on, other than being the Suki sister, being rejected by Shivai, Chandi poking on her eye, she protecting Shiva from swallowing the poison. She's also considered a Devi, and the worship of her, especially in Nepal, has put her in the line of what they Shivaism, and it's also put her in the line of being an actual goddess in Brahmaism, which is a part of all different aspects of Hinduism. So she is a well-known goddess in that area, but they don't usually work with her, because she's sometimes by a lot seen as a false goddess. But the thing is, she's one of the most friendly ones. As long as you're worshiping her, she's going to take care of you, much like most of these other ones. A lot of them see her as a false goddess because she's technically a Naga. And that's where a lot of things get screwed up. But the thing is, if you don't continue your worship with this goddess, like with Ahriman, you're going to know. And it's going to come back to haunt you. So we have to keep that in mind as well. But beyond that, I hope that makes the muddy water a little more clear. Any questions? All right, cool. Then I guess we're done.